Hey you, I'm Ali Amo, and this is the Lease on Life podcast. I've missed you. It's been so long since I've had you to myself, and I can get so lost in the conversations with other people, I forget you're even there watching and listening. It's episodes like this where I think about who I'm talking to. And as I've recently discovered, I don't realize how close some of you actually are. Funny story before I get into this episode, and it's a really, really important one because people think about being a cycle breaker as you've got this problem, this thing that you keep repeating that you want to stop, and then you imagine the person that doesn't have that in their lives anymore. And it's not quite how it works. It's kind of like the start and the finish line. It's like it's not a typical journey. So I think it's really important to understand the process of a cycle breaker, and that is the journey. The process is the journey. It's not about the destination. Speaking of which, my partner was recently on a destination and was leaving the area that I live in, Cronulla. He was catching a train out into the western suburbs of Sydney, and we live near the beach. I was at a Joe Dispenza workshop for a couple of days, and he was getting onto a train, and as he walked in to the train, he heard my voice, and he looked, and there was a woman who was watching a video of me on her phone, and he just yelled out to her and he said, "Oh, is that Ali Amo?" And she replied, "Yes." And he goes, "Oh, she's the best, isn't she?" He didn't tell her who he was, so he's clearly biased. And she went, "Yeah." And then he had to get on the train because he was going to miss it, and he wanted to chase after her and say, "Do you want to meet her?" But he didn't. And it took me 3 days to believe that that was actually the truth that he told me and not some story he made up. But he actually texted me a minute after it happened and said, "No joke, this just happened." And I didn't realize that there were people where I live listening and following along on this journey. Technically speaking, it could have been someone watching my Planet Positivity YouTube channel from my world travels, but I can never know, really. You never know who's watching and listening, and you never know what you're able to do for people. But if there's one thing I want to be known for doing for people, it's helping them grow and learn. My years as a teacher gave me that opportunity, but it's at a very different level and with extreme restriction when you're in a classroom, whereas this content that I teach, my intellectual property, but also having the ability to teach it globally, simultaneously, leaving it there for life digitally with the internet, and also, like I did a couple of weeks ago, running workshops, and I've got a masterclass coming up. But to me, this is home, being on the podcast, because this is in my house, this is in my room, this is my space. And I have the freedom to say yes to people, to say no to people, and to be selfish and keep you all to myself. So let's get into the journey of a cycle breaker. You know how when you imagine a journey, I don't know about you, but you see it as a straight line, right? Even if you're traveling to another country, it's like the plane leaving one country and going in a line over to the other one. Or if it's a road trip, the line of the map, the outline of where you're driving to. I was recently in Tasmania to spread the ashes of my baby that I had 3 years ago today, or filming today. Beautiful experience. Did not plan that road trip. Kind of regretted it. Should have planned it. But sometimes, even if you're just doing like a trek, you know how you plot the journey and it's a line. It might not be straight. The journey of a cycle breaker is a very different experience. And I have the perfect metaphor to explain the phases of the journey, but the best way to imagine this is 3 roundabouts back to back in a line with no gaps. And all you're doing is going around and around and around. Interestingly, the journey of a cycle breaker is tapping in and out of a series of cycles, going around and around and around. So it starts the first roundabout, which most people, not most people, a lot of people live in for most of their lives, is being what I call the active participant. You are actively participating in every thought, every emotion, and every experience that you have. And that could be the experience of sitting on a phone, on social media, scrolling TikTok, watching the experiences of other people that were recorded. Then they had the experience of editing that recording of their experience and then uploading it for the rest of the world to then experience their experience. That can also be the experience of having an emotional reaction internally and then exploding that with an emotional outburst externally. Everything you experience, you are so in it at the time. For the whole time, you are constantly in your experiences. You're actively participating in them. And it's really hard to see what you're doing or understand what you're doing, figure out why you're doing it. Just like in the midst of your thoughts, you don't think, what am I thinking? Why am I thinking this? You're just thinking it. And you think you're the one that's thinking. Same goes with your emotions. The difference is the way you get lost in thought, and we do that. We also, there's a beauty to it when it comes to daydreaming and imagining and all of that, creatively speaking. It is arguable, though, that we can get pretty creative with our mental spiraling, even when it's not a necessarily positive experience. But we get pretty creative. When it comes to emotion, however, if you get carried away by emotion or swept up by emotion, it's not necessarily that you get lost in the feeling, because the physiological sensations that you feel in your body, the tingling, the swirling, the pins and needles stuff, the heaviness, like, that gut sinking and the heart wrenching and all of that sort of stuff you get, the tightness in your throat, the tensing in your body, all of that sort of stuff that happens. You don't really get lost in that like we think we do. Because as soon as you have an emotional experience, your mind picks up on that energy and starts spiraling. And then the thoughts that you have inspire more emotions to surface, or more energy is given to the emotions you already feel, which heightens them, giving them more momentum. Then that gives more food for your thought. And then it just keeps going over and over again until it spills out of you with the physical part of your cycle. So those are the three components: the mental, emotional, and physical, in case this is your first time here. When you are wanting to break a cycle, you first have to recognize that you're actively participating in it. And although it is highly controversial to say something of this nature, but in order for an experience to continue in your life, you have to, on some level, actively choose to keep participating in it. You're agreeing to its continuance by your presence, by your repeated experience. When you want to break the cycle, the first thing you have to recognize is that you are actively participating in its creation, its repetition. Once you've recognized that that's what you're doing all the time, to get to the next roundabout, stop spinning or stop going around in circles there and venture out to start going around in the next circle. The next roundabout is what I call the passive spectator. I'm not going to lie. It's not like you've finished with the first roundabout and now you're going to keep going around the second roundabout. You will constantly be like, the infinity loop. You can infinity loop around both of those roundabouts repeatedly while you're trying to break a cycle. In fact, there is a part of you that will do that for quite a long time, because once you recognize that you're the active participant and you decide you want to start passively spectating yourself, the self, in the midst of the cycle's repetition, what that means is when the cycle is repeating, you have to recognize that that's exactly what's happening. And you will likely miss it when the emotional charge comes up. That's what happens first. It doesn't matter what happens externally, whether it's someone at work, whether it's someone at home, whether it's something, somebody breaks something, somebody makes a mess, whatever the thing is that creates an emotional reaction inside of you. The likelihood of you catching, oh, I'm in a cycle, stop participating in this feeling and start, my brain farted. Spectating, that's it. Stop participating and start spectating. It's kind of like, it made me think of, it's not just mothers, fathers can do this too. You know, that over the top parent at a sporting event where they're so actively involved in telling the coach what to do, telling the kids what to do. It's like you're not actually on the field, but you are participating in that game. Stop, because you're supposed to be there as a spectator. And we kind of take that too far, not just as parents. I did that when I was a teacher, coach, all of that sort of stuff too. You can get a little carried away, and it's because of the emotional reaction. So when you have that, the chances of you catching yourself out in that, oh, I'm having these sensations, I'm feeling the fire, I'm getting heated, literally heated, and I'm starting to think things and wanting to do things. The likelihood of you catching yourself out at that point is quite slim, especially at the start. If you can try and catch yourself when your thought ties itself to those emotions and starts spiraling out of control, to recognize that you're in it is kind of like if you've ever lucid dreamed before, or if you've heard of lucid dreaming, you'll get the point. The idea is you wake up in the dream, right? And you realize I'm dreaming. You may wake up quickly after that and not be asleep anymore. That's happened to me, for example. Or you might just forget what happens, or you might lose your lucidity because it didn't happen on purpose. But if you can lucid dream in this experience, that is being the passive spectator. This is the person who at whatever point in the cycle realizes, oh, I'm repeating the cycle again. The second you can do that, all of a sudden, you're not so actively participating in the experience. You're actually taking that back step and watching yourself, noticing yourself, and just the very disconnection from the experience that you get from doing that keeps you revolving around that second roundabout. And hey, you're in the midst of some shit going on in your life when this cycle is unfolding, right? When it's repeating, something has triggered that. And just because the button has been pressed doesn't mean the button's not continually being pressed. So say, for example, this cycle that you're looking at breaking is looking at conflict. You might, oh, I'm in a cycle. Oh, it's because I've had an argument with someone. I've had a disagreement with someone, whatever. Just because you've recognized that doesn't mean the conflict, the drama doesn't continue. It will keep unfolding in front of you. But instead of reacting, when you get that emotional charge and then the mental stuff starts happening, and then boom, 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 before you know it, you're physically responding, or you're throwing things, you're walking away, you're shutting down, you're whatever the thing is that you do. If you can take that split second to think, what am I doing? Or why did I just do that? Or I feel like I want to do this. Oh, I just thought that wasn't really good. That act is keeping you revolving around the second roundabout. But the second you start actively participating again, you've gone back into that other roundabout. And you might constantly do that figure eight, that infinity loop between actively participating and passive spectating for a long, long time. But the beauty is most people only recognize the cycle has repeated, and I mean a full completion, because it's completed and you've walked away and you're like, oh, that just happened again. You're not a passive spectator when you finish actively participating. That's just self-reflection. And in self-reflection, you're not going to remember the precise emotions that you felt and the sensations that were surfacing in your body that were attached to those emotions. That's how it is expressing in your body. But you also won't be aware, no matter how deeply you self-reflect, of the intricate layers of thought that were triggered once that emotion surfaced in the body. You might go, yeah, I wanted to say this and I didn't, or I said this and I don't know why I said that. Often when you say things that you don't mean, or you don't know why you said it, or you don't remember, it's because the emotional charge that was triggered by someone, something external, was so high and heavy that the mouth just fired rapid mouth missiles in defense, in response from the ego. The ego had that emotional reaction, not the self, if that makes sense. Either way, once you have done the infinity dance with all the cycles that I have been working on breaking and effectively broken in my life, I can tell you there is no set period that you keep doing that for. Recently, a cycle that I thought I had broken reared its ugly head, not in the same way it used to, but I realized as I was doing it, I'm doing it again. It's a little bit different. I'm not doing what I used to do completely, but this is a smaller version. It's like an entree version of what used to be in my main course. It's still an entree, and it's still that same food, really. So even when you think you're done on this journey, you can go back to the first roundabout before you know it. The beauty is, the more practice you get at flickering between those two roundabouts, and the more adept you get at passively spectating one cycle, you start to recognize it's not about everybody. It's not about everything else. It's not the outside stuff. Whatever bugs you is showing you the bug in your web. And it's your job to figure out how you spiral around that with your cycles. And the cycles are mental, emotional, and physical. And just because there's this one bug doesn't mean there's just one cycle attached to it. There can be a series of mental, emotional, and physical spirals that you do in your life when other bugs are touched in your web and they start wiggling because you thought they were dead. They hadn't been bothered in a while and they were just laying dormant. Once they start wiggling, it starts coming up and starts wanting to come out of you. The longer you spend discovering the inner workings of your cycles and knowing so deeply, with such intricate detail, what the three components of that cycle looks like for you in all its forms and variations. At the workshop that we did a couple of weeks ago, we did just a random brainstorm of different types of physical expression of a cycle, in the positive and the negative. I had a huge interactive whiteboard and it got covered in minutes because it wasn't just one person brainstorming just the things that they do. After we did that, we then started rapid firing, and I'm Aliamo for a reason. I love the rapid fire because I was getting such a spectrum of different things. Oh, it was mind blowing. And realizing within myself that the amount of physical expressions of a cycle that you think that you have, it's the tip of the iceberg, really. You think of the big things that you do in response, but there's actually quite a lot of little things that you may not pay attention to. I'll give you one of mine, for example. It wasn't just leaving when everything got out of control with a conflict, for example. It wasn't just the leaving, it was also the driving. And it was the way I would drive when I was angry. And if I haven't told you before, or if you're new to me, I'm a Taurus. I'm not pretty when I'm angry. I'm not pretty all the time anyway, but when I'm angry, holy moly, I scare myself. So getting behind the wheel. And then it's the listening, what I listen to when I'm angry. I'm not a heavy metal girl, but I'm a heavy metal girl when I'm angry. and I love Stained, but even just we were talking about some of the songs that we listened to, and for me, I just remember in my adolescence and early adulthood, just Linkin Park, and there were two. If you're my generation, the millennials, you'll know the two main songs, or three actually, I think it was, that I would listen to just to express my anger and scream in a much more healthy way than directly at a person, but just to release that emotional energy. And then it sort of helped me process the mental energy, but then the speed and the driving gave me like a physical vessel for my energy too. It was just it hit all fronts. And I could come back from driving for 45 minutes basically nowhere, a completely different person, just because that physical aspect of the cycle has allowed me to play out all of it. And it made me realize that it may have been more beneficial for me to do that without the crazy explosions, or, the Taurus, head down, horns up, seeing red and charging. I could have stopped the charging and the carnal damage had I just legged it off the bat, but you live and you learn, right? But once you are at that level where you know what you're going to do, you know what you're going to say, you know how you're going to feel, and when you start to feel it, you're like, oh, it's happening again. That level, when you can catch it right off the bat, you're already at the third roundabout. You are the expert witness of your cycle. And although the second roundabout doesn't seem like a walk in the park, especially because you're flickering between the two, but the truth is, the hardest part of the cycle breaker's journey is the expert witness. If you know you're going to do something wrong, something that's not only a detriment to yourself, it's not just going to hurt you, it's going to hurt somebody else as well, and you still have to do it. Do you know how hard that is? Imagine how hard it is knowing I'm feeling something that is really uncomfortable for me, and I'm very frustrated by what was just said or done. I'm thinking of saying this and doing this right now, and I really don't want to, but I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to do it from this 3 degrees of separation, this so far removed place that I'm like doing it. It doesn't even have the pure emotional charge that the active participant has when it unleashes the beast, right? But you need to do that, and you need to witness from the expert's position what it looks like on the faces of those around you to see that part of you. There's a big difference between somebody kind of eye rolling at this, or somebody terrified, or someone just hurt. And you might only see the damage that you cause with your cycles for other people for the first time when you are the expert witness, because you're learning all phases of this cycle, all components of it, and how they all play out, but not just for you, for the people around you. Interestingly, a huge part of self-awareness is not just, your cognitive, your emotional, and your physical sides. It's also understanding how others perceive you. How can you know how others perceive you if you're not observing how you come across and how others are perceiving how you come across? That's what the expert witness allows you to do. To say it's not fun is an understatement, because you know you're hurting someone. You kind of know it when you're active participating, but you kind of don't care because you're so in your experience. When you're the passive spectator, you flicker in and out of being the active participant. So you know, and you kind of care, but they hurt you. And this is what I do when I'm hurt. This is what I feel when I'm hurt. This is what I think. And this is why I do what I do. I have to see what I'm doing. And then when it's like, I know I'm going to do it. I know I'm feeling this. So this is why we say to somebody, for example, don't get offended, but we know how this can be perceived by others and how they may perceive us for saying that. But it's on levels a lot of people don't actually get to. And a lot of people get to the point when they're the passive spectator for so long. I know my cycle, I'm just going to stop it. But they only want to do that when it becomes physical. Normally I'll say this, normally I'll do this, or normally I won't say this, and normally I won't do this. So I'm just not going to. And you know what? I'm breaking the cycle. This is the mistake most people make because they only focus on the physical. And it's like with things like addiction. The physical part of the cycle, the physical expression, is just the symptom. What comes out of you is just the symptom of what's inside of you, how that is expressed, how that is represented and manifested in physical reality. So if you can keep that in mind, you actually have to keep that in mind, if I'm going to be honest with you, because when you get to the stage where you know what's about to come out and how it's about to come out, the last thing you want to do is let it out. And it takes everything in your power to do it. But you have to. You have to allow those emotions to surface enough and those thoughts to ruminate enough and have that energy expelled out of you as close to as typical as you can get, because the only way that you can effectively break a cycle is to know it intricately. Once you understand it all, you see it all, you felt it all, you thought it all, you've done it all, then you're ready to break it and you have the best chance of success. So it's at that point where I'd hit you with the cycle breaking formula. And it's 4 steps, but takes a bit of work, but you are ready. You know your cycle, you know yourself. You will be able to catch yourself as quick as that emotion can surface. You will recognize what it is and you'll know where you can go with it, and you get that choice. Am I going to continue this cycle or am I going to break it? Just quickly, I'm going to prove to you how effective these cycles are, because once you have the experience, it gives you the knowledge, which you then integrate and it comes out in your expression. So my curiosity is, what happened in your body, in your mind, and what were you about to do when you heard the music start? Because you know that's the signal for wrapping up. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see this is a different time that I'm recording. I've changed. I did the sign off and my brain completely farted. I forgot to tell you something major. But I'm very curious to know if you even listen to the end, because it's like almost watching the credits or listening to the credits. So I totally forgot. I'm actually running a free masterclass on Zoom called the Cycle Breaking Blueprint. If you'd like to be a bona fide cycle breaker, if you're an aspiring cycle breaker, if you're a generational cycle breaker, it's an hour only, free. It's on Eventbrite. Links will be in the show notes. If you want to be there live with me, it's 5 to 6 p.m. Australia time on Zoom. I'll have about 10 minutes at the end that I'll dedicate to a Q&A. I hope to see you there. I'm very excited about it. And it's Sunday night, the 1st of December in Australia. And by the way, if you are that woman listening to me in public on the train, know that you absolutely made my day. And I wanted to give you the biggest shout out. So thanks for being here with me for this ep. New ones will come out to you every other Thursday. So much love for you, beautiful people. Especially for all you cycle breakers out there, no matter where you are on your journey. I got your back to break the cycles, because together we are the Cycle Breakers Collective, and we're here to change the world.